Alright, hi everyone, this is Carol from Segovia Quilts, and today's video is going to show you how to quilt let's say a queen size quilt on a standard domestic sewing machine. And what I mean by standard domestic sewing machine is it's essentially a very small sewing machine to be quilting a queen size quilt on. And I'll show you the machine that I'm working with today here in a little bit, but I made this little drawing here so I can show you the measurements that I'm going to be going off of today. So if you're going to quilt a standard queen size quilt, let's say the width will be around 94 inches and the length will be around 104 inches. So all I did was I took those two measurements and I split them in half. So to go your width here, half of that would be about 47, and it, give or take a few inches depending on how wide your quilt is. And then half of the length is going to be about 52 inches, again, give or take, whatever size your quilt is. So I'm currently working on a quilt here for a client. Now this is not a queen size, it's about a lap size. It's a little bit bigger than a lap size, but definitely smaller than a twin. But I started quilting it yesterday, and I'm going to finish quilting it today. And I left 2 blocks pretty much in the middle of the quilt unquilted, so I can show you that today and how I do it on my domestic sewing machine. So I went ahead and I did some measurements here. So let me zoom in here and show you my safety pins. So you can see right here, these are 2 safety pins here and 2 right over here. So now what I did was I measured the entire length of my quilt, and I found, excuse me, I found where the 52-inch measurement mark is. So that is right here. This is the 52-inch, and then I found the 47-inch measurement mark, which is right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put each of these spots in my domestic sewing machine and show you what it will look like to quilt a queen size in your domestic sewing machine. So let me go ahead and show you my machine right now. Okay, so here's the machine that I'm using to quilt this quilt right here. Now this is a Brother. This is the Project Runway Limited Edition CE 5000 PRW computerized sewing machine. So this is what I mean when I say your standard domestic home sewing machine. And you can see the throat right here. So let me pull up a ruler and you guys can get an idea of what kind of space I'm working with. So going from the bottom here to the top here, we've got about 4 inches of clearance. And then going from this side to the needle, we've got about, I would say maybe 5 inches of clearance. So that's not a lot of space to be working with. But I want to show you that while it's not a lot of space, it is possible to do it. So yeah, so if anyone's ever told you, you can't quilt a queen size on a domestic sewing machine, that's not true. You can. It's just going to be, it's going to be a little difficult, it will be cumbersome, and it will be time consuming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get my quilt. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to set up my camera, but I'm going to show you guys, or I'm going to show you from having the machine like this to putting my quilt in here. I'm going to show you what it will be like to actually maneuver a quilt into a domestic sewing machine. So let me go ahead and get my camera set up and we'll go ahead and get going. Okay, so I'm set up and I'm ready to go. So I'm going to start with the first measurement, which is going to be the width. So I'm going to start at the 47-inch mark. And again, this is what it will look like if you were trying to quilt a queen size on a domestic sewing machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start feeding my quilt into the throat, and I'm going to go all the way to 47 inches. This way you can see what you're going to have to work with if you quilt, a queen size on your domestic sewing machine. So you're going to have to do a lot of maneuvering to get it in here, but it will be doable. Now, something else to consider is If you are using a very thick batting, it'll put more bulk into the throat of your machine. So I have just now fed 47 inches worth of quilt into my sewing machine throat here. So I've got my 2 safety pins directly under my needle here. And let me go ahead and grab the camera and show it to you close up. But from a distance, this is what it'll look like. Now, the batting that I'm using, this is a low loft batting, so it's not very thick at all. Even having it all in here, I do still have some space to move around with. So let me go ahead and grab the camera and show it to you close up. Okay, so you can see now kind of what I'm working with, and I know it's difficult to tell on a camera compared to in person, but this is what I have to work with. Now, when you're quilting in the middle of your quilt, a queen size and a small machine, you're going to be very limited on the amount of space or the amount of distance that you can move your quilt. So, you know, obviously I'm doing this one-handed, but let's say that there's something right here in the middle of the quilt and I need to quilt it. So, you know, you want to keep your fabric nice and smooth. So I like tucking mine under the bunch, if you will, or the roll. So let's say I'm quilting. I mean, you still have a good amount of space to move around the fabric, and you know, obviously if I was using 2 hands, it would be a little bit better. But because my sewing machine, this is the end of my the flat top surface, so I don't really have a whole lot of space for my hand as it is. You know, as I move to my left, I start running out of room and my hand is no longer on top, which is not going to make for very steady quilting. And same thing, you know, if say this is my right hand, if I'm moving in towards the machine, I only have a couple of inches to work with. So it will take a good amount of maneuvering on your part, and it will take some time to do that amount of quilting. So I'll go ahead and take this out, and I will do the length of the quilt. So let me go ahead and set the camera back up, and we'll go ahead and move on to the length of the quilt. Okay, so I'm going to show this to you as I'm doing it because, you know, I want you to know exactly what it's going to be like. So that again was the width of the quilt. That was right here. So now I'm going to show you the length of the quilt, and again, for a queen size that's about 104 inches long, the middle measurement is about 52 inches. So again, I've marked that on my quilt already, and I have to turn my quilt so that I can get it the right direction. All right, so here we go. So I'm going to start feeding from the bottom, and I'm going to go in 52 inches. So we'll open that up, find my measurement mark. So, and I'm kind of rolling this as I'm feeding it in. You don't have to. If you like bunching, you can bunch. If you like rolling, you can roll. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. I'm just kind of doing what's coming easiest, and right now it's just kind of rolling it up. As I get closer to my pins here, I'll start stuffing it in instead. So, there you go. Alright, so I've just fed my quilt in to 52 inches. So now I have my entire bunch right here, and I'm at my measurement marking right here. So, again, I'll go ahead and grab the camera and show it to you close up so you know what it'll kind of look like if you're doing it. And you know, I'm back here, I'm behind my camera, or behind my machine right now, kind of arranging the quilt so it's not hanging off, because if it hangs off, the weight of the quilt is going to start pulling, and it'll start making your quilting a little bit difficult to do. So I'm just kind of rearranging that a little bit at a time. Alright, so let me grab the camera and I'll show it to you close up. Okay, so this is what it looks like close up. Now again, this is using the halfway mark of the length measurement, which is 52 inches is our halfway point. So I have all of this here stuffed into my throat, and you can kind of see, I mean, there is still some space, but not a lot. So I'm just kind of flattening it out in there. Alright, there we go. So again, let's pretend I'm quilting something right here. You know, I am still able to move it around. I do have some space. I can move it a couple of inches at a time. Now, the up and down part isn't so much the problem. It's the left and right part, because that's where you're really limited on what you can do because of the small throat space. So, and obviously if I had two hands, then I'd be able to do it a little bit easier, but you can kind of get an idea. You can really only work a couple of inches at a time. So again, it's not impossible, but it will be a little bit more difficult. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the quilt completely out of the sewing machine, and I have those two blocks, this block and there's another block down and back that I still need to quilt. I'm going to go ahead and quilt that for you here on camera so you can see, you know, what it's actually going to be like. The whole point of this is to show you what it's like to quilt a queen size on your domestic sewing machine. So I will go ahead and quilt this block as if it was the middle of my queen size quilt. So let me go ahead and get my gloves, if I can find them. Now I do use quilting gloves when I do my quilting because it gives me a little bit more grip, and especially if you're working with this bulk sitting right here, having a little extra grip is definitely a plus to get your work done. So I think my gloves are in the back. Oh, no, there they are. Alright, so I've got my gloves. So now again, this is going to be difficult. I'm telling you right now, it will be difficult, but it is doable. So now I'm looking at my block to figure out where I want to start quilting. And I think I'm going to start quilting up here. So let me go ahead and stuff some more of my quilt into the throat. Now, when you're actually quilting your quilt, I highly recommend you, I don't want to say learn, but you get used to quilting stuff upside down and sideways. Because if I was to quilt this like how I was quilting it yesterday, this part right here would go into my throat and all of this would be out here. So I would only have maybe 18 inches of stuff into the throat of my sewing machine. That makes it a lot easier to work with. But again, because this video is specifically to show you how to quilt a queen size on a domestic, I'm going to go ahead and do it for you here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my bobbin thread first. And I got to get that thread in the foot of my quilting foot. There you go. So, whoops. So again, I'm, you know, even just working with this, I am having trouble even maneuvering my foot lever, because my foot lever on this machine is actually in the throat of my machine. So it is a little difficult to do it. And I'm just taking a couple of locking stitches here. And this particular machine does not have a needle down function. So a lot of, I don't want to say specifically quilting machines, but a lot of the higher end machines, if you will, they have the computer, the machine set up already, so when you stop quilting, your needle will finish down into your fabric. So this one doesn't have it, so what I did was I did my locking stitches and then I used my wheel to put my needle down into the fabric. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and readjust the camera so you guys can see it a little bit closer up instead of so far away. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're all set up and we're ready to go. Before I start, I'm going to make sure I don't have my quilt hanging off the back and pulling down. Alright. And I do have to do a lot of maneuvering before I even start to make sure everything is going to be good to go. Alright, so I've got my glove on, and we can go ahead and get started. So I hope you can see. There we go, so I stopped, and I'm putting my needle down so I can readjust. And it's going to be a lengthy process because, again, I just sewed, I think I did 3 inches. I sewed 3 inches and then I had to readjust. So, and I think I'm going to keep my gloves off just because the amount of readjusting that I'll have to do, it'll become a whole process. There, so I had to stop because I was feeling some drag on the quilt. There we go. And all I'm doing is there's a logo on this shirt that I'm tracing around. So now that one I was able to keep going for a good amount of distance. And I'll be able to do the same thing on this part here. And I'm just readjusting the quilt underneath my pile right here. There. All right. Okay. Alright, so now we're going to start moving down here. So this should be a little bit easier. So, needle down. And this is exactly what it'll be like when you're quilting, like I said, a queen size on your domestic sewing machine. Down. And the bad thing about this is this machine is not only small, but it's very light as far as how much it weighs. So as I'm pushing this in, the clump of stuff that I have over here is hitting the front of the sewing machine on this side, and it's actually moving it. So periodically when I'm quilting, I have to straighten out the sewing machine because I've put it kind of off at an angle or something while I'm trying to quilt. So here we go. Alright, and I'm using my left hand to do the sewing machine wheel because since all of the bulk is on the right side of the machine, it's my right hand that is pretty much handling the weight of all of the bulk. So if I let go of my right hand, it's going to rearrange my quilt, and I don't want that to happen. Alright, so I have a pin coming up, so I'm going to go ahead and take that out. And I lost my bag of pins. Anyways. Alright, so I'm just checking behind, because now I'm going backwards, and I'm essentially sewing blind. I can't see where I'm going, so I'm having to check behind the sewing machine to make sure I don't have any pins back there. And if I did, I'd go ahead and take them out now. Alright, so I'm coming up to a transition point where I'll have to change directions. I see it coming, and there. And I'm looking at the rest of my logo to see where I'm going to go, because this logo is not completely connected. So what I'll probably do is I'll just quilt right up to this little point, and I'll jump over and then come back down so that I can make it one continuous stitch line. There we go. I'm going to stop on the bottom of this turn right here, put my needle down, and take out my 2 pins. Now, these 2 pins, again, are the halfway point of the length of the quilt. So this is 52 inches. So if this was a queen size, I have 52 inches of bulk over here, and I would have 52 inches of bulk over here. Now, since it's not, I have 52 inches of bulk over here and about 24 inches of bulk over here. Alright, so I'm going to rearrange the quilt back here. There we go. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and snip my threads from where I started. There we go. Whoops. Sorry about that. There. Alright. So we're going to continue. Again, I have another gap in my logo, so I'm going to quilt up, and then I'm just going to jump right on over. So here we go. And it's going to come kind of like to a point and then back down. And I need to stop because I'm feeling drag, so I'll readjust the quilt that's between me and the machine. And I'm going to stop down here and remove this pin. There. So I hope you kind of get the idea of what it'll be like, again, to quilt a queen size on a domestic sewing machine, on a regular small domestic sewing machine. So I'm going to keep going here. We're actually, we're almost done with the logo. And I'm going to jump over, come to a point, come back down. I'm quilting blind, and I feel a pin coming up, so I'll go ahead and stop, take that out. There we go. And I'm just checking the rest of my logo in the back to make sure I don't have any other pins. But while I'm stopped, I'm going to go ahead and readjust my quilt. And all I'm doing is I'm putting my hand right here on the surface, and I'm sliding it under, and then I'm using my right hand to push the rest of the bulk on top of my hand. So I'm going like this and like this. This way it gives me a nice flat surface on the bottom. And by doing that, you can also make sure that you don't have any of your quilt folded up underneath this, because it can happen. I've done it before where the edge of my quilt was tucked up under, and yeah, it was crazy. I sewed some of the quilt to itself, so I had to go in and pull a couple of stitches. Alright, so here we go. my hands. Okay, and I'm feeling some drag starting on the back side. So we'll go ahead and readjust that, and we're just about done with our logo here. Just a little bit more to go, and yeah, I'll leave that pin in there for now. I think I'll get it in a minute. Go ahead and grab that pin, and we've just about completed our logo. Got about 3-4 more inches to go. Completed the logo, so now I'm going to do my last little locking stitches. I like to make sure it's real secure. There you go. So press your foot up, pull it out, and I'm going to snip my threads on the top and the bottom. This machine does not have an automatic thread cutter. There you go. So let me zoom out, and then I'll pull the quilt out and show you what we just quilted. Alright, so here's the block that we just quilted, and I went around this whole logo here, and then I traced around all of these little letters here. And again, I did that all on my small domestic home sewing machine. So it can be done. It'll just be a little more difficult than if you had a larger machine, and it'll take a little bit more time. So if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. And thank you for watching my video. I hope you liked it. And until next time, I will see you guys later.